Emotional health and emotional well-being, emotional regulation is all about language. If you can name it, you can tame it. If I ask you how you are, you're going to say fine, bad, or good. What does bad mean? Bad could mean exhausted. It could mean furious. It could mean devastated. Those are all very different feelings, and we would approach them in a very different way. The other day, my son is 4. He was really angry. And I was like, what do we need to do? He said, I'm very angry. I need to take a breath. And then he said, but mommy, I really think you need to take a breath because you're looking pretty angry too. And I said, I'm overwhelmed. So we had this opportunity to define a whole nother emotion, and he's used that phrase since then. It's kind of like anything, right? We want to start that conversation early and often and really just talking about feelings okay.
Welcome to Everyday Heroes, a podcast from Shore Capital Partners that highlights the people who are building our companies from the inside, every day, often out of the spotlight. With this series, we want to pull those heroes out of the shadows. We want to hear their stories. We want to share their stories. We want to understand what drives them, why they do what they do, how they might inspire and support others to become everyday heroes too. In this episode, I talk with Amanda Skrinjorich, the Senior Medical Resource Director at Harmony, which is part of Transformations Care Network. Amanda is a mom, a wife, a professor, and a psychiatric certified physician associate with her own family mental health story to tell, a story that fuels her passion for doing cutting-edge work, caring for patients, and her team at Transformations.
My name is Amanda Skrinjorich. I am the Senior Medical Resource Director at Harmony, which is part of Transformations Care Network in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I'm also a psychiatric certified physician assistant, or it's associate now. They changed the title recently, and I haven't quite got on board yet. I grew up here in Morgantown, West Virginia, so I've never really left the state. I lived in Marietta, Ohio for a year while I went to PA school, but grew up. I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters, but I'm the youngest and the only one biologically from both of my parents. I always make the joke that my parents like to collect strays. So each of my siblings got to bring home like another person who was, had to have a different living situation for whatever reason. And so I had lots of foster siblings as well, kind of unofficial foster siblings. And so I always say that I have all these siblings, but I'm also kind of an only child, which is pretty cool. I'm the youngest of all of them. They've told me before that I'm quite bossy. So I think I was maybe started out thinking I was a leader before it was assigned to me.
Well, you had to carve your space with that many siblings, right?
Yeah, I'm a fierce self-advocate. At least that's what I say about my toddler. She's 2. So I have 2 kiddos. I have Lydia, who is 2 years old, and JT, who's 4. And then my wonderful husband, who I've been married to for 7 years. And I like to run. That's my big thing, is I'm a runner. And I love mostly just, there's not a whole lot for what you love right now other than work and kids when you have toddlers. I'm very much a morning person. That's something only people around me know. So I get up at 4:45 every morning because that's when you can get things done without toddlers. That's the best time to have some peace. But I also power down at around 9 o'clock at night. Yeah. I'm not a party animal.
In addition to being a runner and an early riser, Amanda describes herself as perhaps a bit bossy, but definitely a fierce self-advocate, which is a family trait she already recognizes has been passed to her daughter. Dr. Ryan Wakeham is the Chief Medical Officer at Transformations Care Network and has known Amanda since before either of them were part of Transformations and before Amanda was ever even working in psychiatry. His story of how they met certainly reinforces that fierce self-advocate characterization. He calls it gumption. And he recognizes that gumption has also been critical to Amanda's success in transitioning from a role where she saw patients to one where she's leading a team seeing patients.
Amanda actually had originally joined the organization kind of pre-acquisition, pre-Shore. So I actually trained her clinically, personally, early on in her career. And, she is I'll give you a quintessential example. So I was overseeing a hospital contract. I was the one in the hospital seeing patients. And, she was at the time a physician assistant student in the internal medicine department, rounding on the same floors I was rounding on. And I would see see her in the kind of physician room or the provider room doing dictation and writing notes and stuff. And at some point along the way, she built up the gumption to come up to me and just kind of say, hey, I'm Amanda. We haven't officially met, but I'm really interested in psychiatry. And, I didn't know if you'd be interested in having me as a student with you. And so her ability to just kind of seize the day and take the opportunity and come up to me and say, hey, I, noticed you here. I really have an interest in psychiatry and I'd really like that opportunity to do it with you is just a perfect example of how leaders are built, right? Or how we think about how you become a leader or how you learn to, or how you can really impact others and manage and lead. And in order to do that, you have to be able to seize the opportunity, right? And so that's a perfect example of how Amanda seized an opportunity, saw what she wanted, and she went after it. And, she's a very humble individual. And so, she probably wouldn't even tell that story herself. But the point of fact is the fact that she's able to do that, or even just have the self-awareness to even consider doing that, really points to her ability to manage a team or to impact a community in a way that a kind of direct patient care or one-on-one encounter, those are critically important. And in order for us to meet our vision and our goals and help people, we need to have individuals who are willing to see patients one-on-one. But when you're able and willing and capable of doing more, that's where we can recognize that opportunity and seize it. And, she did that for herself.
When Amanda introduced herself to Dr. Wakeham, she was a student in internal medicine. So her introduction wasn't just about a career move. It was about a career change. So I wanted to know what drove that. What was behind her passion for psychiatry at the time, and now as she's built her entire career in the field. And as it turns out, her answer drew our two stories closer together.
Probably my mom is the biggest influence on me going into mental health specifically. I actually asked her this morning if she was okay with me sharing a little bit of her story because it's a very personal thing. But she had really, really severe depression my whole life. I actually played a pretty significant role in her healthcare since I was in, high school, where she had to go on leave for work and things like that for pretty severe major depressive disorder. And so she always tells people that I got into this field to fix her. I don't know that that's true, but it's definitely been amazing to be part of an organization that isn't just specialized in psychiatry, but is the best. She actually gets services through our company. So she gets Spravato and TMS treatments, which are interventional psychiatry treatments. And I've seen her in the last 2 years go from surviving to being truly well and thriving, and something that 6, 7, 8 medicines never accomplished. And it's an amazing thing that I get to be a part of.
Say more about that just to help anybody who's listening understand what those therapies are and how they're different maybe than traditional. So just in terms of my own interest, just to share my story, my father also struggled terribly with depression and ultimately died by suicide. And so mental health has always been a part of our family conversation as well. And so I would love just to hear you say more about those things that are working as part of this story.
Interventional services, as we term them, are kind of like your alternatives to medications, right? So they may include some kind of medication. In the case of Spravato, it's actually S-ketamine, or an intranasal substance that we, under the supervision of a physician or an APP, is administered actually by the patient themselves. They give it to themselves and they squirt it up into their nose, kind of like Flonase. And I say when we talk about interventional services, I almost sound like a used car salesman because I get so jazzed about it. It works so well. It's the only thing where I've seen someone suicidal and by the end of the treatment, they were smiling, truly smiling, right? It's an amazing and very fast acting treatment that also increases neuroplasticity within the brain. So we're not just helping in that immediate point. It's FDA approved for treatment refractory depression and actually acute suicidal ideation. But we're also increasing the likelihood that they can kind of get that kindling or light that fire of improving even further in other aspects when they leave that space too. And then the other two modalities, and we only do the one other one, is transcranial magnetic stimulation. Then there's also ECT. Those are very different. We do not do ECT in an outpatient setting. That's an inpatient setting. But transcranial magnetic stimulation essentially uses the technology. I tell patients it's kind of like if you've ever had an MRI, we use that same technology. It's rapidly alternating magnetic currents. Only we focus those alternating magnetic currents or that magnetic energy with pulsations using a coil on the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And I always follow that with saying that's a lot of nerdy words for me to say where depression and anxiety are housed, right? So we're kind of putting your brain on a treadmill. We're giving your brain physical therapy because it's sleepy. It needs to wake up. And we do that by administering these pulses. And what we found is that it is an incredibly effective treatment for major depressive disorder.
For obvious personal reasons, it was thrilling to listen to Amanda talk about these new treatments, even if I couldn't fully understand them. So I wanted to better understand how what she was sharing ties into her work at Transformations Care Network.
The company that I started to work for was Harmony, which is a clinic that started as a small company in West Virginia by 3 doctors who were residents at WVU, and they wanted to do their own thing. And I'm probably not doing the story justice, but it's a great one. And they grew, and they were a bunch of guys, so they needed, a bunch of their patients wanted a female provider. That's where I ended up coming in. I came on and grew and grew and grew. Lots of therapists, lots of medical providers. And then we're acquired by Transformations Care Network, or SHORE. So when we were acquired, they liked our style of practice. They loved, that we were on the edge of everything, how our clinics were organized, how we interacted. And so we kind of, as I understand it at least, or maybe I'm just building myself up in my mind, they modeled what we were doing for the entirety of the company. So we have several clinics throughout the country in all different states. I personally work as the Senior Medical Resource Director, so I manage all of the APPs within our West Virginia market or region. We have 5 clinics currently in West Virginia that offer medication management services, therapy services, interventional services. So that's kind of our broader view. In West Virginia, most specifically, we have a very big passion for substance use disorders, addiction management, medication-assisted treatment. So we keep that as a core part of what we do, while also providing medication management, therapy services, and then also now these interventional services, which I always have trouble wrapping my mind around, are quite rare. People don't know about them as well as I would expect. I was kind of raised in it, so I think I didn't realize till we went to a conference once, and they were like, who does ketamine services? And there were only like 5 of us that raised our hands and 500 people or something wild like that.
And why is that, Amanda? Why do you think that is?
So to your point about substance use disorders, ketamine is a drug. Esketamine is what Spravato is, but ketamine itself is a drug that can be used and misused, abused. I think it has a stigma around it. It's a psychedelic, right? So psychedelics have all kinds of things to unpack from many years of cultural ideas about substances. I think that people are rightfully very frustrated by mental health services, right? It's hard to get access to care. There's a shortage of providers. There's wait lists months long to even get in with someone. Then you tell them, I think of my mom again. She tells them her whole story. They pick at her. They ask about her trauma. They ask about this medicine and that medicine. At the end, they write a script, and she leaves feeling worse than when she came because now she had to talk about all these terrible things. And she takes the medicine for a few weeks, and maybe she's numbed out, or she's zonked, or maybe it makes her more anxious. These are all things that actually happen to her, right? And then she goes back, and in the case of her, before she got introduced to me being able to have resources to help her, she got another resident who then needed her to tell the story again and said, oh, that medicine didn't make any sense, and switched her to a new one. And it's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I feel worse. Nothing is helping. And so I think providers can sometimes get in that place too. PCPs, even psychiatric providers. I can't imagine working for a clinic that didn't have these services that we offer. What do you do when someone's tried 6 medicines? You just say, well, let's pick a 7th, right? We know that it's exponentially each time that we try another medicine, the chances that it will be effective for symptoms drops. Just so far. And the side effect profile often makes people quit. So we know that their chances of it working are dropping wildly, and the chances of them quitting because of side effects are skyrocketing. Why would we want to refer, or why would we want to try, right? I think that sometimes people just are kind of giving up because they don't know about these options. So really trying to just kind of improve awareness, and they're still kind of relatively new. Spravato's been around, just not for very, very long. TMS has been around a lot longer, and I think should be more well known. I don't know that I can say why it's not.
The work Amanda and her colleagues do is both profound and profoundly difficult. Here she sums up the kind of mindset, the determination, and really the hope required to live it every day with her team and her patients.
You will never hear me say, I'm so sorry, I've done all I can do. I am never going to give up on people. I'm never going to see someone and not try another medicine or try this new thing that we thought of or heard of, or at least just there's a thing in suicide prevention training that we learn. It's called sitting in the suck, right? Sometimes when we've tried a bunch of the options, medicines don't really feel like they're working. We'll just kind of sit with the person in the suck, right? Just kind of make sure they know that someone's there and hears them. And sometimes there's nothing to be fixed, but you will never hear me say, I've done all I can do. This is terminal. We know that it is. Sometimes mental health conditions are terminal. You know that, unfortunately, more than anyone, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I love, and sometimes what is really, really hard.
Yeah. Amanda Skrinjorich is an everyday hero whose superpower is her gumption. She had the gumption to approach Dr. Wakeham to become his student before she was ever even studying psychiatry. The gumption to innovate and grow her career in the field and at Transformations. The gumption to talk about mental health with her young children, to turn her mother's mental health challenges and her own experiences as a daughter into a career of helping others, and the gumption to sit in the suck, because sometimes that's all you can do. For those of us who have lived the challenges of mental health personally, there's great hope learning about the progress in the field and the leadership of Amanda and the team at Transformations Care Network. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our other everyday heroes at www.shorecp.university/podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. There you will also find episodes from our Microcap Moments as well as Bigger, Stronger, Faster series, each highlighting the people and stories that make the microcap space unique. This podcast was produced by Shore Capital Partners and recorded in the Andrew Malone Podcast Studio, with story and narration by Anderson Williams, recording and editing by Austin Johnson, editing by Real Audio Books, sound design, mixing, and mastering by Mark Galloop of Real Audio Books. Special thanks to Amanda Skrinjorich and Dr. Ryan Wakeham. This podcast is the property of Shore Capital Partners, LLC. None of the content herein is investment advice, an offer of investment advisory services, nor a recommendation or offer relating to any security. See the Terms of Use page on the Shore Capital website for other important information.